Their ideology behind land was only to collect the tax as a part of their revenue generation. The government of independent India came up with acts and laws to establish equal rights of ownership of land, which now constitutes the crucial episode of India's economy. Where will the farmer go if he has a complaint? Where will the farmer go and try to bring out his issues? Good morning and welcome to the first session in Chapter 2, Unit 1, first semester B.Ca, Pre-Reforms of Indian Economy, where we are going to speak about land reforms in India. Now, the question of land as an asset, as a factor of economic growth has always been a very controversial issue to be spoken about. In India, we consider land as a major asset. But since the rule of British and when we started getting liberated ourselves from the British rule, the land controversy has always been a very big thing to be talked about. So that's why under the rule of British, that is the British Raj, we had witnessed many atrocious regulations that were set by the British that actually put our Indian farmers and citizens into serious trouble. Their ideology behind land was only to collect the tax as a part of their revenue generation. But our farmers had toiled day in and day out in order to make something for them. They had to sacrifice the ownership pattern for many times. They had gone to the extent where they would have seen that significantly many a times, the socio-economic development growth for the backward population was extremely less. So the land reforms in India need to be brought in such a manner that everybody is benefited from this particular act. Now, moving further, the government of independent India came up with acts and laws to establish equal rights of ownership of land, which now constitutes the crucial episode of India's economy. In India, we believe that food, shelter and clothing as per the rule of economics as the topmost priority. When it comes to shelter, as in home and land, this is something which everybody wants to value at its best. Moment India got independent, let's say after 1950, the first thing that we wanted to do is that give the rightful owner his share of land. Many farmers in India still struggle to take their land back and they are under the clutches of the money lenders. They always feel that they have never been given equal importance and chance to revive their life, come up with something new. They have been always burdened with debts which are unparalleled, which cannot be even imagined, and they keep on paying on and on in terms of the interest factors. So what did the government exactly want? The government wanted these farmers to have a better lifestyle. At least they should get the right benefit for the efforts that they have put on the agricultural factor. So that's why in the long run, what we tried to do is that the equal rights and ownership of land became one of the most important factors that we can ever talk about. So that's why we started thinking that the land and the land ownership has to be regarded, has to be done in such a manner so that we are able to get a better picture for the Indian economy. Now, moving further, why were the land reforms introduced? Now, the first thing is that we wanted to remove the intermediaries, the jagirdars and zamindars, who were not actually the landowners, but they were the people who held the farmers by the collars and they took the lion's share out of them. So what we wanted is a direct ownership and not trying to bring in the intermediaries who will disturb the entire system. We wanted a system where everybody gets an equal share, gets an equal life altogether, and they are able to live the way they want to. So we saw that we had to grow in terms of the land reforms. We want the farmers to produce their crop. We want them to get the maximum benefit, the maximum profit, and we didn't want these intermediaries to come and take away their share. The next thing is that because of the exploitation what these farmers suffered, the landowners paid no heed to the agricultural requirements and they were solely concerned about the rent. For a landowner, the money that was generated as a part of the story of rent and taxes was more important rather than the lives of the farmer. So we wanted a reform to come up in this particular sector where the farmer is given importance and not the landowner. Let the farmer become the landowner. Why? Because he is putting in the efforts. Let the farmer get the maximum benefit in terms of growth. Let the farmer get the rights of whatever he has invested, time, money and energy. So that's why we wanted to bring in a reform so that the rightful ownership of land gets into the hands of the farmer. And that is why we see that this reform was considered to be one of the most important reforms that were brought in the Indian economy. Now, moving further, the objectives were very, very clear. The primary objectives is the overall renewal of law structure. Now, this is a big word. Let me just try to explain you. When I say renewal of law structure, that means we are not just going to change the law or we are not going to just rewrite a new order or a decorum. What we are trying to do is that we are trying to bring in structural changes so that agricultural lands in India are brought under control, under a proper system. So whenever you are trying to make modification to an existing system, what we are trying to do is that we are trying to bring in a purposeful meaning to it, objective to it, so that that reform actually comes into effect. Followed by the acts aimed at the equal and uniform distribution of agricultural land. Now, I'm going to take a minute to talk about this word equal and equality. Why? Because in India, the problem is all about the inequality that we keep talking about. Many a times it becomes so evident that the rich keep on getting richer and richer and the poor goes down to poorer and the poorest factor altogether. And that's why we want to bridge the gap. We want to see that everybody gets an equal right share over the land. We want this to be a uniform pattern of distribution that could be probably seen so that the concentration of ownership was not in the hands of few. But again, if I go back and try to argue and come back to that same question, try to make you understand that, the land control is still in the hands of few people would not be surprising to most of us. Even now, we see that the domination over the land factor continues in India, which needs to be completely eradicated. What we want here is that you might be owning only 1 acre of land or half an acre of land, but you should be the rightful owner. You should not be put under somebody's custody. It should not come under the clutches of an external person who commands and who completely puts the hard workers work completely waste. So let's not get into it. We have to see that the farmers should get the benefit for whatever they do. Now, abolition of intermediaries of the medieval land ownership. This is very, very important. Even right now, when you just start searching for a home through your apps, what we have tried to bring in, when you look into apps like 99acres.com or when you start Magic Bricks or you see nobroker.com, the aim of these apps was to reduce and remove the factor called as brokers. They didn't want the intermediaries to be a part of the exercise. You own a house, you want to give that house for rent. It is directly a contact between the owner and the tenant. We don't want intermediaries to come. Similarly, you own a house, you want to buy or you want to sell your house, you want to continue with some exercise on that. It has to directly reach the concerned person and we don't want the brokers to come in between. So the buy and sell or rent or lease has to happen with the direct contacts and not with the intermediaries. The same thing is applicable here. We want the farmers, we want the person to directly own their land, continue doing the agriculture, see and go forward seeing that they're able to take the land to the best level possible. They are able to do their agriculture with all the facilities given by the government, and they should not fall into the clutches of the intermediaries. Now let's try to understand the objectives of land reform. Facilitating optimum agricultural produce with healthy and economic practices. So we want the output to remain maximum, plus the economic value for the land should also be achieved, followed by giving the social and economic justice to the previous violation of the tillers. That means to say that at any given point of time, we should give value and importance to the farmer. Any violation in terms of the land and its value or its output should be avoided, and the farmer should be given benefit. Uniform ownership of land needs to be promoted so that exploitation of tenant would be taken off, and that would also help in reducing the rural poverty. That is mandatory, because you see that the farmer community continues to remain poor because they are still paying rent after rent, and they are not able to make anything valuable at any point of time. So this would not be considered to be an important factor at any given point of time. So this is mandatory for all of us to understand and take it forward. Now, the objectives also go in for increasing the agricultural production and infuse of inequality. That's very the factors that you reduce the inequality and increase a commonality factor. Restructure the agrarian relation. That means we want to go back, we want to increase those factors of good relationship altogether, followed by realizing the age-old goal of the land of the tiller. So the person who's producing, that person should get the maximum benefit. That's what we are trying to arrive here. At any point of time, what happens in India is that we see that the production continues for a long time. But is the farmer getting the actual benefit? No, definitely not. Why? Because even from a pricing perspective, or from a tax, or from a revenue standpoint, what happens here is that the farmer never tries to get what he exactly wants. The farmer only tries to take back the factor saying that yes, today I have made so much, but will I be able to see light at the end of the tunnel? So what we want here is that a social structure that gives equality, that gives importance, a better standard of living, also economic value to the farmer. So that's what we want to see at the end of the day, the landowner getting the maximum factor. Now, the land reform types of pre-independence, why this is important for us to understand is that during the pre-independence type, the farmers did not have ownership. The landlords were the zamindars, and many issues were confronted. That is where now you see the stark difference here. The farmer is not having ownership, somebody is owning it, and because of this there were many issues. But ultimately what we need to understand here is that where will the farmer go if he has a complaint? Where will the farmer go and try to bring out his issues? There was no court and law structure at that point of time for those poor farmers who were not really literate enough to raise their opinion. Today what we are trying to see is that we are trying to build a society where the farmer is given maximum importance, where the farmer is given an option to raise his opinions, tell people clearly these are the issues that we are facing and we need to solve these issues at the earliest so that we are able to understand growth and development. Followed by the post-independence, as we abolished it and now we have removed the zamindari pattern altogether. And today, when you look into this picture, this is exactly what we want to see in the clean and green India. We want the farmer to enjoy his independence at any given point of time. We want the farmer to have a complete control of his assets. We want the farmer to see a better perspectives from an economic standpoint. Now, the regulation of rents, that's what we have been talking about. The indirectly or directly, there has been unimaginably high rents which have been charged by the intermediaries, and that is very important factor to know. Why will the farmer pay rent to somebody who's not even involved in the process of the farming? Somebody claims to be an intermediary, comes in between, claims the rent, and during the British time, believe it or not, the factor was such that the farmers were pushed to the corner. Literally, they were squeezed by taking each and every rupee that they were actually earning. So that is why today also you see that the cycle of poverty has not still come to an end for a farmer. We might have heard about many suicidal cases that have come across in the newspaper saying that the farmer is not able to pay back his debt. The farmer is completely subdued under these factors. The reasons for that is that farmer is not getting the actual benefit out of the land. So somewhere the farmer has to be released. He has to be given the freedom to come out and own the land so that he is able to earn the best revenue possible. Now, the tenancy reform that also we brought in, where we provided maximum security, confirming the ownership to the tenants. In pre-independence, the rent which was paid was from 35 to 75% gross throughout the country. Primary attempt was to regulate the rents and give some security to the tenants, or the outlaw tenancy together. What we wanted is that somewhere give some sort of security, belief to the people, saying that they need to get the maximum benefit. The tenancy reform, which means to say that how to renovate, what are the agreements, what are the factors under which this has been given out on tenant on rent and basis, has to be understood, has to be regulated in the best way possible, and then only we will be able to see a betterment and improvement in the life standards of the farmers. Now, the ceilings of the land holding, that was of course given, where the maximum ceiling was given, in which no farm or household, the farmer can hold any other land. So we had kept a proper limit, so that the government said beyond which a farmer cannot hold lands. And similarly, in the year 1961 and 62, the government of all states passed the Land Ceiling Act in order to bring in uniformity across the country, with a new ceiling policy coming in effect in the year 1971. So probably these are those landmark judgments which I would like to say. Why? Because these are those judgments which made the uniformity, equality pattern come across in India. So nevertheless, these factors have to be kept in mind. Followed by consolidation land holdings. This refers to the redistribution or reorganization of fragmented lands into single plot. The trend of fragmentation of land increased because of the growing population and fewer work opportunities that we are talking about. And this fragmentation actually made the personal supervision with the irrigation management and other tasks very, very difficult. This needs to be taken care of. This needs to be worked upon, so that we are able to see that the consolidated pattern is able to generate maximum benefits. With this, I come to the end of this particular session. I hope and believe that all the factors told in this presentation would be of great value to you, both in terms of theory and also in the practical walk of life. In the upcoming sessions, we will be talking more about the Green Revolution, the agricultural policy of India, which is yet another important topic in the pre-reforms of Indian economy. But until then, stay tuned, stay blessed, and stay enlightened forever. Thank you once again for joining me today on this wonderful session.